once you can build those relationships with sales and the customers and understand what really makes them tick, it's a lot easier to price to it, to add value.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
Man, it's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Jennings Executive Search. I had a great conversation with Jon Jennings about the skills needed in different pricing roles. He and I think a lot alike. If you're looking for a new pricing role, or if you're trying to hire just the right pricing person, I strongly suggest you reach out to Jennings Executive Search. They specialize in placing pricing people. Say that 3 times fast. Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the dichotomous relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving, and our guest today is the one and only Jon Jennings. Here are 3 things you want to know about Jon before we start. He is the founding and managing partner of Jennings Executive Search. He has been a longtime sponsor of the Impact Pricing podcast. Thank you, Jon. And he is raising 2 toddlers with one on the way. So I asked him what he's doing for fun. He's like, he's too busy. Jon, welcome.
Exactly. Thanks for having me, Mark.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Hey, I think I asked you this question a couple of years ago when you were on, but I want to ask again. How did you get into pricing?
We started as a finance accounting firm, we got bored. We started working a corporate development role for large manufacturer in Atlanta. They referred us over to commercial strategy, and I got a call. I was like, "Can you work a pricing strategy role?" Which I'd placed a contracts person years ago. So I was like, "Sure, I'll take anything on that looks interesting." And I went down the rabbit hole. They wanted someone out of McKinsey or Bain or one of the consultants, the shops they were spending millions of dollars with to bring in house. And we just put resumes all over the ground. I couldn't figure out, all the different industries and strategies. They had capacity stuff and all these different things that we had to factor in. That was a lot of fun, and ended up calling my brother, who was actually in pricing at Amazon at the time, and started picking his brain and kind of fell in love with the space. I mean, one of the candidates that we had that ended up turning down the job went on to another place and made a 9-figure impact in her first year. And that was insane. And we kept up with her, and she ended up being a client of ours. And we just kind of went from there. We kind of fell in love with the impact of the largest lever that you have, which is price, and started building teams and trying to learn more. I look back on some of our stuff from back then when we first started, like 17, and I cringe a little bit because we were kind of chasing our tail and didn't know quite what we were doing, but we over time figured it out, and I got to learn from a lot of brilliant people, like people that listen to this show who are my candidates. And we found that pricing people are very passionate. They love to talk about pricing. They talk about pricing strategy. So if we throw a lot of details about a role we're working at them, they tend to want to engage. And so our response rates are through the roof. So that's great for recruiters. And we get to just have interesting conversations on a daily basis about pricing strategies across every industry you can think of. And, from the most sophisticated operations to where they got nothing and we're helping them build it. So we kind of just fell in love with it from there, and have slowly, built out the practice to where it's a large, a decent majority of what we do from a revenue standpoint. It's probably like 50-50 between that and consulting and other stuff. But yeah, we love it.
Nice. So before we hit the record button, you and I chatted a little bit how it's nice that our jobs are such that we get to help people have impact in the world, but you can't find many more roles than a pricing role that's going to have a huge impact on a company and then therefore on a career.
Yeah. I was just interviewing a guy, and he was telling me the story about his pricing journey at a company where he was able to, he's kind of an economist by, hobby, and, he kind of came up that way. And he was able to kind of foresee some of this inflationary stuff, and he got this company ahead of it. Ended up making, a $70 million impact by, adjusting price and being ahead of the inflation. And they had ended up having the most profitable year by a large margin. And he got a really nice bonus, which was 150% of target. So he got an extra $15,000 for the $70 million impact. We always joke about putting in, if I could just get 2% of impact, you don't have to pay me a base, just give me some health insurance and I'm off. I'll be good. But yeah, it's fascinating the impact with a little tweaking in the pricing arena can do.
Yeah, and companies ignore that so much. So, but what's funny though is that you don't get involved until a company has said, "Hey, we need to do something on pricing." Right? You don't go out and tell a company, "Hey, your pricing's messed up. You got to go fix this."
That's probably the next step. So we come in with consultants usually. So there is a self-awareness of a potential problem or opportunity, and that's when we come in to tell them and advise them on org charts and exactly how much this is going to cost, and show them the talent and what they need to be able to pay and do to be able to really drive change. Because if you do pricing halfway, you might as well just not even do it. Is my thing. 'Cause if it fails, then it was just all wasted effort for the most part. And so that's where we can get involved and give them a little bit of guidance. And usually I lean on the consultants because they bring a little bit more of a, influence than a recruiter, but we get to sit on the sidelines and watch it happen over and over. So, and talk to the, brilliant minds in the space. And we try to use that to be able to advise our clients.
Nice. So you said you've been working a lot with private equity firms lately, and I'm just curious about how that's going. How do you, when do private equity firms tend to want to engage you?
It's usually a year or two in, and sometimes it's on the front end. So there's always the period of adjustment of they acquire a business and they're bringing them in, whether they're, and they're kind of going through this acquisition strategy. And then they want to optimize and they want to start to think about EBITDA, or maybe it's growth. They start thinking about pricing and commercial strategy. A lot of, if they're buying founder-owned businesses, there's usually not a lot of sophistication on the pricing side. Sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes they have their golden goose guy that does 18 different jobs and one of them is pricing. And he's really good at it. We've seen that. And now we're just helping them take it to the next level. But a lot of times, especially, manufacturing industrials, they haven't thought about it. So we come in and partner with the private equity and a lot of times consulting firm, whether it's on the front end, the consulting firm's looking at them and talking to the private equity. We can't really do much until you have an asset internally that can help us, because we have to drive price through sales and, you've got to have that internal structure. Otherwise we're just going to staff aug, which, a lot of these firms don't do. And so that's where we come in and we're like, okay, we'll put the right pricing talent in place. And then sometimes it's offboarding. So they are kind of off ramping from a engagement standpoint, the consulting firm, and they need to build teams behind them. Analytics, sometimes even like software development or tools help, all kinds of different roles. But we start with the pricing leader and then go down. So it's all stages. But typically we're coming in year two of, private equity, think 5-6 year cycles. Usually the pricing transformation doesn't start right off the bat, but sometimes it does. But usually it's year 1.5 to 2.5 is where we're coming in.
Yeah. And so they typically start by hiring a consultant to come in and do the job or focus on their pricing. What are the pricing needs? And then they bring you back in to say, hey, as they leave, we need someone, or we need someone to help manage them and learn from them as they're in the process.
Yeah. And sometimes it's, they bring me in and then I, can refer, consultants or, I've talked to some companies where their, a chief marketing officer is like, we need to do something here. And so I'll get an expert in my network to say, okay, talk to this person. And then here's what, I think we need a leader. And here's what the org chart can look like long-term. And then here's some options from a consulting standpoint. If you want to engage and spend a little extra money, or you want to do it homegrown, we'll help them all the way through it. And with providing some consulting advice, not just ours, but we'll lean on our network to help us. They kind of bake in their service with ours and vice versa sometimes, just to be value added to the client.
Nice. Okay. I'm going to ask a hard question, and I know your answer is going to be, it depends, but you're not allowed to answer that way.
Okay. I need my coffee.
$50 million company, Porco. And you get to design the org structure around pricing. What does it look like?
What's the industry? What are they making? or what's the service?
I don't know, something industrial.
Okay.
Some manufacturing company.
Let's say they're doing, I don't know. So they're manufacturing, they're selling into distributors and, wholesale,
Sure.
whatever. They're just, okay. They're not manufacturer and distributor. Obviously, there's only 50 million. Yeah, you need one head count. Depends. Shoot, said it. So you start out with, I would bring in a director pricing strategy, or just pricing, whatever. And how many markets are you in? What's the data environment look like? And assess it. And then probably needs an analyst, or, he or she needs an analyst. And that's about it. $50 million company. And, where are they sitting in the market? There's a lot of factors, but for the most part, rule of thumb, you can probably get away with one jack of all trades doing pricing. And you could probably bring in someone that's just quantitatively, brilliant, that has some experience from, crafting strategies beyond cost plus. And they could probably take your lift from 1 to 5 if on a scale of 10, which is a big impact. And then from there, you decide if you want to continue to invest. But I would start with 1 and then see what the impact is. And that person, his job is going to be make a business case. If, and a good rule of thumb, if you're going to make a hire and you can make a business case of a 10x of their salary as impact, that's a pretty good opportunity. You invest there. And if they can continue to make a 10x business case and it's working and you have proof of concept, you keep rolling. Because they may take your business to the next level, and you may be able to, not just, optimizing EBITDA, but growing with pricing strategy. So that'd be my 2 cents.
I think that's a great answer. And one of the things I love about industrial businesses is because of the cost of goods sold and they're doing cost plus pricing, probably, there's a physical cost of goods sold.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't theoretical developer hours in software.
And so a lot of times with these companies, it's just, okay, we need to understand a couple things, because you're not going to value based. So let's say you're selling sand. I don't know. It's a fairly commoditized business. But there's market-based principles that you can use. So you got to understand your cost to serve. You got to understand your competitors' cost to serve. Freight costs sometimes becomes a big thing. Understanding where your customer's shipping from. Then you understand your pricing power, what you're competing against. Just some blocking and tackling stuff that a lot of companies don't understand, and being able to understand what your true price is. The price advantage book, where it's, pocket price waterfall, and also being able to map out, kind of volume versus price, and your, most valuable customers, and being able to understand who they are and how to drive more value to them and make them a priority. And then the ones that have they've kind of beat you up on price, they're not doing a ton of volume, you can be a little stronger with them. And just thinking through some basics can get you a long way when you haven't done that before. So one person can do that, depending on how many SKUs you have and, how many different customer segments. But usually they can just find the low hanging fruit and start picking it off. And if there's greater opportunity, then they can make a business case and see if you want to hire somebody.
Nice. So let's flip the question upside down now. What size company do you think should have a team of, let's say, 5 pricing people?
I would say $1 billion.
$1 billion?
Something like that. Mm-hmm. Depending on industry, depending on the data environment, how many SKUs, sometimes there's a lot of tactical work that goes into it, and price setting. And, there's people that need to help with these sophisticated contracts. You got to have some different role players. But for the most part, I would say general rule of thumb would be 5, but you start with hiring a really good leader, and you can have someone coming in as kind of a player coach. I would hire, let's say I'm $1 billion manufacturer, I'm bringing in one really good director, senior director of pricing, and giving the resource to hire one analyst on day one. And that's where you start. And then as far as what they need from there, if they want to invest in tools, bring in a developer in-house to build it homegrown, or you want to invest in a consulting firm to help build something. I wouldn't go get $1 billion to go get a massive software system. Then, you see what kind of impact you can make, and then you kind of build it from there. Sometimes a company will just throw a bunch of dollars at something and then they try to do it all at once. And I think with pricing, it's dip your toe in and just, invest in the right people, the right firm that matches from a consulting standpoint, and then build from there. And if you hire someone that's a really good leader, they're going to show you the path. You're not going to have to tell them, hey, here's your org chart, here's how you're going to do it. They'll figure it out for you.
I love that answer. And one of the things that's neat about pricing is that it's never perfect, right? You're always going to get better tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And so why think we're going to hire everybody at once and go change the entire culture, right? Let's do it a step at a time. One company that I've worked with in the past, Pros, they had a fascinating business case where they don't sell you all their modules. If you want to go buy from Pros, you only get to buy one module. And then you have to implement it, install it, prove that it works, and then you can go buy another module.
I like that.
And it just makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And, some of these transformations, you do it all at once, and, sales is adjusting. It's it's change. And it's a lot of times, I think the biggest skill set is change management from the leader. It is the biggest skill set needed, which can be tough. So you have to have someone that's going to be really thinking about markets, thinking internally through, all the various historical pricing data, and being able to influence across an entire organization, and change the way they think about their business, to a large degree.
Nice. Hey, talk to us about what's the state or status of pricing positions. Are there more people looking for jobs or more jobs looking for people today?
I don't know. That's a bad answer, bad pod, but it's a balance. I mean, everyone I know, usually, people get laid off, companies get sold, all kinds of things happen, and sometimes it takes a little while to find the right opportunity, but everyone that's worth their salt, they land on their feet. So I would say, while during inflation, it was crazy. So everything's about your perspective. So when everything was going nuts, everyone was hiring pricing. You couldn't find enough people. And most people were behind, and we'd help them try to catch up. But once they already lost, and they're just looking internally and they're not thinking about the future. That was a crazy market. So now things have cooled off a little bit. Pricing teams aren't growing quite as quickly. So we're looking at it from that lens, where I think if you took out the blip and you looked at pricing jobs and talent, it's it's more linear without the big jump that we saw with crazy inflation numbers. So I would say it's pretty steady and healthy, just like the rest of the job market. And I think with private equity, it's being squeezed a little bit with cost of capital, and they're looking at a little bit more growth strategy and commercial optimization. They're starting to lean a little heavier into pricing and more like kind of middle market PE. There's not as much arbitrage as there used to be. We could slap a bunch of companies together and sell for something greater. They need to have a little bit more of a sophisticated strategy. So you see the private equity investing in more commercially minded operating partners, and even bringing in these roles that essentially are going across their portcos and evaluating the corporate strategy or the commercial strategy, and kind of pushing pricing initiatives. So it's definitely, there's some shifts in the market. Some things have pulled back and other things have accelerated. So I think it's pretty balanced.
Got it. And if you were not a new pricing person, an experienced pricing person who just got laid off because the company was downsizing or they got rid of their pricing departments or whatever, what would you do? What approach would you take besides call you?
I'll quick my answer. And I would say, look through your network. I mean, it's just like anything. Take your time, take a breath. It's going to be all right. You don't need to jump at the first thing. Evaluate it based on the merit of the opportunity. Every time I look at a pricing role, I want to vet it out fully. I don't like to get burned, where sometimes these pricing roles are a little bit of fool's gold. There's someone up top in the, on the board that says they need to do it, but no one in the executive team is really buying in, and they're just going through the motions. You sometimes see that in publicly traded companies, and then the winds shift, and they, every quarter is something different. So, try to vet out the full scope of the opportunity. The right one will come. Just, I would say, just farm your network, reach out to people you've worked with in the past. You don't want to just blow everyone up, but just let everyone know you're on the market, and hit up some recruiters and network, and, jobs pop up, apply. But for the most part, I just, hit your network and, show impacts on your resume. You can, versus, I like numbers.
Numbers.
Yeah. And how you contributed to that. And so that's my, it's not rocket science. Just be patient if you can financially. And, you can wait 3 months. It's okay. The right one will pop up. You don't have to jump at the first one.
Talk to me real quickly about resumes versus LinkedIn. Do anybody write resumes anymore?
Oh yeah. We don't make our part, we do consulting across advisory and strategy, for partner level stuff. So a lot of times we won't make them write resume at that level. But everything else, I mean, keep your CV updated, and put it on LinkedIn. That helps me. But we have a lot of people in our database. So, we're kind of getting to that point. But the more you put on LinkedIn, and keeping an eye on that. I know you get a lot of spam on there, but what we try to do, as far as we do LinkedIn outreach, is we throw a ton of details at people. You be reporting to all the different stuff. So I'd say keep an eye on your inbox, even if you're happy in the role. It's just, I'll give you data points and some intel in the market, and it's always something. You never know when the next tide's going to turn. So keep it updated, and do your resume. I mean, and I'm not a one page guy. Like, it doesn't have to be one page. If you want to have some highlight reel one pager, that's cool, but also have your 2 to 3 pager. It's fine. You've had a lot, if you had a long career and you've done a lot of cool things, put it all on there. I mean, I talked to a guy the other day. He did some merchant stuff, and he's been pricing, but you got to include it on your resume, because the company that's hiring, they actually want to see someone that has been on the merchant side. It's like, oh, they're going to negotiate. So it's, make sure to put it all on there, because you never know which opportunity you're going to need that to pull that experience.
Can I say I haven't done a resume in 15 years, and thankfully I never will again the rest of my life. But that was, I just assumed they went away with LinkedIn.
No. If I'm submitting something for a job, I want a PDF or Word doc to throw in there with them. We still link their LinkedIn account too. But it's, so I had someone the other day who's like, you have my resume. I was like, no, I don't. Like, the LinkedIn, I'm like, well, just put it, same thing, just change the format. Just so we can send the doc. It's still, common practice.
Nice. Okay. I actually, that was an aside for me, because I wanted to go back to something else you said, which, I don't even know how you do this, but you said that you should vet the opportunity, make sure it isn't a, fly by night, some board member said, hey, let's go try this. How do you do that?
Follow the money.
How do you do that? And how do you think someone else should do that?
It's a lot easier for me to do it than if you're interviewing for a job. So having a third party is nice, if you trust them. But I follow the money. And it's on the intake call. I can tell, if they're serious about the transformation. If they're investing dollars, like if they're saying, hey, look, we've earmarked a budget of, $5 million. And we're thinking about consulting firms, tools, they can come in, they can have a head count on day one, then we can build from there. I'm like, okay, that's a good foundation. That means they're serious. When I hear we just want to bring in one person, and then, and kind of, they get really clammy when you talk about adding a head count. And then you start talking about the buy-in. Okay, who's the VP of finance? How are they, how do they work? How they worked in the past? And you start getting answers of, well, they actually, report into this person and they control pricing power, but we have to influence, we have to do it this way. That starts to be some red flags where it's like, okay, well, are they on the same page? Have we had a discussion internally about it? And I start asking kind of tougher questions and digging a little deeper. And then from there, it's not perfect, but you can kind of read the room a little bit on, what have they done in the past? And sometimes the story is, we brought this person in and they couldn't drive the change and I look at the background of the person they brought in. And if it's a good match and they've had success in their past, then I'm like, okay, well, maybe the problem wasn't the individual. So you kind of have to infer and go with your gut. You're going to talk to these people and they get excited about all the stuff you're talking about as far as what you can drive, or they looking to just check boxes and always follow the money is my, it's imperfect, but we, as a recruiter, I think that's my responsibility is to be a conduit of information between two parties, vice versa. And if we can increase our bandwidth of that, that information, then that's fantastic. So, when we vet a client, we do the same thing when we vet a candidate. We want to know all the dirt. And the more the company tells me and the more the candidate tells me, the better I can do my job. It's like I'm your, almost like I'm your attorney. Tell me everything and then we'll help solve the problem versus trying to sugarcoat it. And when a company tells me about all the dirt, all the bad stuff, I start to get really comfortable. When it's all rainbows and butterflies, I'm like, this is new. But I like when it's like, here's all our problems and this person will pose a little bit of an issue. And this person, is more agreeable to this and seems excited. So here's, so when they tell me where the bodies are buried and the landmines are, I'm like, okay, now we can navigate it. When, it feels like they're covering something up or not telling me the whole truth. That's when I get a little nervous.
Okay. So I dearly love that answer. And as you're giving me the answer, here's what's going through my head. I've probably, had a half dozen jobs in my entire career. You've probably talked with 1,000 companies and seen what works and what doesn't work in your career. In fact, how many companies do you think you've talked with? It's probably way more than 1,000. Oh
yeah. Who knows? I wish I had that metric. That'd be fantastic. Let's see. And when we say company, I mean, I talked to, I had one pricing leader job. I vetted 83 people, not all from different companies. Some of them are the same. It's always fun to get the story from people that, sit next to each other, for the same, the same kind of perspective, reporting to the same boss, doing the same stuff. But yeah, I've got, let's see. Yeah, probably maybe even tens of thousands of individuals at various companies across the country, big and small.
And what's fascinating about that is you've got the experience and the knowledge to know how to ask questions, to know what to look for. And those of us who've just done, a handful of searches for ourselves, we aren't experts at that.
Mm-hmm. So we have this thing that a buddy of mine, who's a former BCG consultant, coined for me, where it's fittest athlete. Because we kind of look at the different levels. When you're at the top level, you're trying to find a leader. We want to find people that have made impacts, and we want them to tell those stories. And then we want to fit it within the culture, within the individuals they're going to be having to drive change to, and how their personality and their skills translate to that. But as you start going down the org chart, it's hard to have the clarity because people have less experience. So you're having to go vet on other things. So I like to see, let's say we're hiring a senior analyst. What I want to see is what they do outside of work too. Get on GitHub and do modeling and whatever. They're trying to get side hustles going. I always like to see someone with a side hustle. I talked to one person that was going to an Ivy League and then decided to pursue golf and transferred schools and pursued a golf career. Ended up being professional golf, but he modeled out his entire golf team's all their metrics, and really was just a brilliant modeler. And ended up the golf career didn't quite go, and then got into an analyst role, and then navigated over toward commercial strategy and pricing, and was kind of thinking three-dimensionally about it early in his career. But that's the type of pedigree I look for. And I placed one individual. She was an actuary, and kind of just burned out. And I talked to her, and she loved the idea of pricing. Just her eyes lit up. She was, knew economics really well. She understood elasticity models, and I had her do a case study for a client of mine and interview, and she nailed it and she's a rock star. So we try to go in, and I see a lot of people about engineering. They understand how things connect. So that skill set, if they have some business acumen and a little bit of personality to go with it, they translate well to pricing. I don't, someone that's more tactical pricing roles, I don't want to put in some of these positions where they just have understood a system and how it works and how to keep the wheel going. I want to find people that like to break the wheel or build it. And so that's our approach to the more mid and lower level, is people that, kind of are just high achievers and with a quantitative math brain.
Yeah, one of the things I find is that oftentimes pricing people, if you've been in the same company for a long time, you think that pricing is what that company does. And you really do have to break it. You got to think outside that box.
And sometimes I talked to an individual just the other day, I think it was like 17 years, or that's 12 years at one company, most of his career, but he kept breaking it. And so I was like, okay. And a lot of times these companies change so much that they're not even the same company in 10 years, and they got acquired, and so many things change. But for the most part, if you are in just one environment where it's, you're only seeing a narrow view of one type of strategy, and it's sometimes hard to pivot.
Yeah. Jon, this has been fascinating as always, but we're going to have to wrap it up. Last question for you. What's the one piece of pricing advice you want to give our listeners today that you think could have a big impact on their business?
Understand your customer. Go on ride-alongs with sales. I think I've said this before on your podcast. But that really is, understanding their motivations and, and where you're positioned in the market. Because you probably have a lot of different segments, and once you can build those relationships with sales and the customers and understand what really makes them tick, it's a lot easier to price to it, to add value, to change. Hey, we're going to add a little more sophistication to the way we provide this service. We've got, let's build this app out and make it really easy for them. And now you can price to that. If you can understand that, then you can reverse engineer price into, different value drivers you can create.
Okay. I'm going to make a quick observation. Your advice was understand your customers, and our entire conversation was about how you understand your customers. So nice job, Jon.
Thanks, Mark.
So we're going to have to wrap it up. To our listeners, thank you so much for your time. If anyone enjoyed this, please leave us a rating and a review. And also, Jon, if anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
Find us on LinkedIn, Jennings Executive Search. You can go to our website, jenningsexec.com, and, send us an email. We got phone numbers on there. And, if anyone wants to send over a resume, we'll throw it in the database and have a call at some point in time. But most likely, I know you're out there. So, but don't be afraid to reach out.
Nice. And by the way, there's also a link to Jennings Executive Search on the homepage at Impact Pricing. Finally, to my listeners, if you have any questions or comments about this podcast or pricing in general, feel free to email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact. Thanks again to Jennings Executive Search for sponsoring our podcast. If you're looking to hire someone in pricing, I suggest you contact someone who knows pricing people. Contact Jennings Executive Search.